Hello, Alexandra here. Today I'm going to talk about dealing with the shadow of stage orange. In some of my previous videos, I've talked about the shadow of stage red and what that might look like, the narcissism and the highly difficult people, and the shadow of stage blue, maybe being prey to conspiracy theories and blindly following a leader like their evangelical minister, and the rigidity of blue, so they may be discriminating against gay people in the church. And I've talked a little bit briefly about mean green, where sometimes green gets a little sensitive and can be scolding around political issues. And I've even talked about the shadow at stage yellow. Stage yellow can have a little bit of hubris because they're so effective and they're so used to being inventive and novel about solutions. Maybe they solve problems they never even thought they'd solve. And so that can lead to a little bit of hubris, but of course stage yellow is also simultaneously very aware of their ego and working on themselves. I have only touched on the shadow of stage orange by mentioning the ills of capitalism, and where stage orange is the rational, scientific, capitalistic phase. And of course, capitalism, the shadow of capitalism can destroy the environment or go too far with deregulation and have like predatory loans that led to the 2008 economic crash. But let's talk about some of the ways stage orange can lead to a personal shadow at stage orange. Because if you're at stage green or beyond, you likely have stage orange co-workers, maybe work for a company that's largely stage orange family members, maybe some stage orange friends. Stage orange is a huge percent of the population is at stage orange. I'm going to throw out 25% of the population, but these percents differ based on which thought leader is talking about the percentage and when this thought leader is talking. So like 20 years ago, I've heard maybe Ken Wilber say stage blue is at a certain percent, and then maybe a video made or a book he makes later talks about stage blue being at a different percent. So these percentages they're just not exact. Nobody exactly knows. But let's just say a large part of the population is at stage orange. So we want to be able to deal with folks when they are in the shadow of stage orange. And of course, by shadow, a person will have different amounts of shadow based on their own personal life and their own personal experiences. So we can generalize a little bit, but not everybody at stage orange is going to fit this paradigm. But there are some generalizations for the stage and how stage orange expresses itself through us. So especially, this can be especially hard if you're at stage green and you're so different than stage orange. You just left stage orange. It's kind of easier to be triggered by a stage we just left, because we're still differentiating ourselves from the previous stage. So stage green, communal, collaborative, diversity, equity, inclusion, sensitive, values deep and meaningful relationships, the very relational stage. Whereas stage orange, of course, is an external stage. They're chasing external validation. They're a little bit more materialistic, definitely a competitive stage of hierarchy and ranking and trying to rise to the top through external quote-unquote success, whatever that means to them. There's a huge emphasis on the upper middle class taste, upper middle class style, upper middle class income, the upper middle class house, the upper middle class neighborhood, the upper middle class clothing and manners, and the trophy kitchen and traveling. And the reason I say there's a huge emphasis on the upper middle class as far as materialism goes is that I was once watching a reality TV show about very, very wealthy, famous kids. I think Paris Hilton might have been on it, but kids like that. By kids, very, very young adults in their early 20s, still doing the hanging out, sitting on the couch and partying and drinking together. And this group of people was talking about how society, even though they were very wealthy, really points toward the upper middle class as being, quote, where it's at. So, this shadow of stage orange, it's more of a transactional stage. When people are in stage orange and the shadow of stage orange, they might contact you when they need something from you. Friendships might be a little bit transactional. Now, it depends on what your love language is. If your love language is hanging out, or if it's words, or if it's gifts, there is a love language that's transactional. You help me move, I'll help you, paint your house. So if somebody is already transactional as a love language and they get into stage orange, they really may be not so much into deep and meaningful relationships with their partners and friends, but more of helping each other out, helping each other maintain their image of success, like helping each other redo the house, or helping each other shop for the car, helping each other maintain that external image of quote unquote success. So, stage orange, it's not a deeply intimate stage. They may find intimacy, revealing of personal vulnerability, to be too touchy-feely and too emotional, and they may be uncomfortable with it. And they may even think, if you're at stage green and you're into expressing your vulnerability and you see that as an asset, they might think you are weak. If you are at stage green and you don't care about money, and you're more into your authenticity and your beingness and your empathy and your sport, they may see you as a little bit weak. Stage orange is the pull yourself up by your bootstraps stage, and they may miss some of the systemic racism or sexism. They emphasize personal responsibility as far as quote unquote success is concerned, but they may miss also the system and the society one is in affects a person's opportunities. So, for example, a Caucasian person at stage orange may miss the fact, unless of course they've been exposed to it, maybe in school or maybe just hearing about it or reading about it, they may miss their own white privilege, and they're a little bit too tied to believing that they are the grand champions of their own success. They may not consider generational wealth, or maybe their spouse led to them being wealthy, and they're all about validating themselves through this external success, but not necessarily, they haven't reached the systemic thinking that green has. They haven't necessarily reached the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and inclusive societies. So when you're talking to stage orange, they may be emphasizing the house and the car, and you may be there even a bit as an audience. So when the stage orange has the party and they're showing off the house and the style and the new kitchen and the decorating and their clothes, and they're on Facebook and they're showing off their kids' achievements and their fitness body, their trophy fitness body, the neighborhood, the car, they're not necessarily into deep authenticity or downshifting or valuing the quality of their life. They will hold on to that workaholic job or that high driving job, and they just haven't got to the point where inner work is a lifestyle. And sometimes orange is, here's an example. I am a musician, and so people at stage green are like, wow, that's so interesting. Tell me about it. And then they'll come out and they'll hear you. They'll hear you play. They're supportive. They'll share their authenticity, and everybody wants to support each other at stage green. I have heard from a stage orange person, quote, well, how good are you? Quote, do you make money off of that? They're trying to find out where you rank, and also if you outrank them. Oranges are competitive, and they're not the most self-aware stage, so they might not even realize it. And of course, this is a shadow of orange. Not every single person in orange is selfish and overly competitive. It depends on the personality, the person, their life circumstances, their upbringing. Even the Myers-Briggs types, like the NF types, tend to be kind of altruistic. So I'm not totally generalizing, but you may find some of this more so in the stage orange folks that you know. And you may find that with orange, with the transactional nature, there are strings attached. If they do something for you later, they're going to call in that favor. And you have these hierarchies. Stage orange is all about hierarchy and who's at the top of the pyramid. They haven't quite realized that there's more to life than external success, and when they max out stage orange, they realize that their quote-unquote success, however they defined it, is external, and it's not making them happy. And so that's when people start maxing out stage orange. But even in the personal nature of stage orange, maybe there's a family and there's a hierarchy in the family, and I've read over the years that a lot of times people at the top of a hierarchy don't realize there is a hierarchy at all, and they don't realize they're at the top of the hierarchy. So they might not even be aware. One example is the typical, alpha female of the family who holds all the parties, holds court, has an audience, has the house, has the great food, and can also sometimes be, if they're dysfunctional, a little bit dominant, a little bit competitive, and a little bit looking for an audience. Now, it depends. There's healthy alphas of any gender where they lift other people up, and they're more about bringing everybody together and championing folks. There's a book, oh gosh, I think it's called Queen Bees and Wannabes, that Tina Fey based her movie Mean Girls off of, that talks about hierarchy. Especially this one is about younger people, but the same story. The kids they're interviewed who are at the top of the social hierarchies in middle school or early high school don't even realize they're at the top of the hierarchy. And there's the mean girls, or the wingmen, who are kind of mean. She gives these mean kind of kids names, but there's something called a champion, and a champion can be kind of an alpha kid who lifts up all the other kids, who is a champion of maybe some of the kids who are bullied. So it really depends on the individual at any age of if they're going to be a little bit domineering and maybe a little bit selfish, or if they're going to be more of a champion. So at stage orange, you have a lot of times in the shadow of stage orange, the transactional nature and the achieving, very competitive. Whereas at green, they want to be passionate and authentic, and they're much more into working on themselves, and they're more comfortable with their vulnerabilities. They want to live life from internal standards. So there is kind of a divide once we get to stage green and past stage green of living an internal life and living a life that is sort of society tells us to live. The stage oranges haven't quite individuated as much as the later stages. Another example of stage orange would be not every stage orange, and most stage oranges are really into the rational and the scientific, and not so much into holistic health. They could be, but holistic health, really, greens are prone to holistic health, according to the book Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen. So you might have oranges They just take the pill. Just go to the doctor, just give me the pill. And they're not dealing with the root cause of their illness, and they are still on the standard American diet, guzzling soda, high fructose corn syrup, and unwilling to change how they eat because they still believe the pill is going to help them, while they continue to maybe raise their cholesterol. Now they've got to have another pill, and maybe raise their blood pressure. Now they've got to have another pill, and another health challenge. Now they've got to have another pill, but they never change how they eat or get some holistic coaching. They may be, if they're not holistic, spraying their house full of chemicals. There's one well-known air freshener that has, of course, a list of chemicals on the back and says, do not spray in someone's eyes because it may cause blindness. You have scented candles with carcinogens, and you have even dryer sheets with BPA. And Stage Orange, hey, they're approved by the FDA, so they will be using all these products. And whereas Stage Green might have done a little more research and be a little bit more aware of the chemicals affecting, say, their estrogen levels. Some of the chemicals are xenoestrogens, and I've read, I don't know if I could totally verify this because I haven't done tons of research on it, but I've read, and you can do your own research to verify it, that half of the fish in the waterways are hermaphrodite fish because of all the chemicals and the laundry detergents and the unnatural chemical substances we're dumping into the waterways. So, and also, of course, a quick Google AI search will reveal all of the chemicals, carcinogens, that are in some of these non-organic scented candles, and even incense, if it's not, I guess, certified organic. So there is a great divide. Green starts to get into holistic health. Stage Orange, it almost feels sort of set in its ways. So if you're past Stage Orange, you might be seen as weak and woo-woo shoo-shoo and superstitious because you're kind of going into holistic health, and you might be meditating, and you might not care about money anymore, so you might be seen as weak even though you are at a later stage. And early orange, Susanne-Cook calls this the expert or self-conscious stage on her PDF, The 9 Levels of Increasing Embrace, is a stage many of us went through at around late teenage years. Some of us stay there our whole life. Some of us move on to other stages. But they are capable of rational thought, but have low insight. And they often will tell you what you should do. In her PDF, she in so many words, she says they're quote-unquote know-it-alls. They can be controlling, and, in the, exiting blue, entering orange, if you read the Spiral Dynamics book, can still be, exiting blue, entering orange, very difficult parents, very rigid, very harsh, very critical, very know-it-all, and they can, in the shadow of entering Stage Orange, really be detrimental to their kids' well-being, depending on, of course, personal shadow also. It's not just the shadow at the stage, it also depends on, what they bring with them from their own childhood. But, you may have noticed, because Stage Orange is not as relational as Stage Green, a lack of reciprocity. So if you're at Stage Green or past Stage Green and you're doing all the calling and you're reaching out, you may find Stage Orange at times to just not value regular, intimate contact as you do. Because intimacy, that is coming online a lot at Stage Green. So you may be ghosted. It's interesting when people say, oh, I'm so glad you called, oh, and they never call you back. That is called inconsistency between their words and their behavior. And a healthy relationship requires empathy, support, consistency between words and behavior. So if you say you have some orange family members, I love you, this is great, we had a great talk, but they don't always return your calls. They never call. They ghost you. They ghost your calls a lot. But they say they love you, and when you do talk to them, it's great, and thank you for calling. And then they ghost you again, and they finally pick up the phone, and we haven't heard from you in a while. So there's a lack of reciprocity that can happen at the shadow of orange. And also, ghosting is an interesting thing, especially if someone's ghosting you on texts. A text is very easy to return, and green is a stage where they realize how they affect other people. They're more conscientious stage. So they will, if they're ghosting because they're way too busy, they will tell the other person, I'm so sorry, I'm so busy with my kids. I'm not always available by text. They'll be transparent, they'll be honest, but you never quite know why stage orange is ghosting. And I'm not sure why, if when people are in their own shadow, in the shadow of stage orange, if they know if they're ghosting, because sometimes not returning a text or a call is a little bit of having a little bit of power over, just in a small way. And you're not necessarily getting the conscientious relationship skills at stage orange that you would get at stage green and beyond. So a good way to deal with this when you're at a later stage and you want to reach out to your family or deal with coworkers or situations where you're dealing with stage orange is just to realize this is not personal. It can be related to their personal shadow or the shadow of stage orange, and you get to decide what you are willing to do, how much effort you are willing to put out or not, how much closeness or how much distance you want. You get to decide how you feel about it, and you have choices around how close or how casual you want the relationship to be based on your values. And detachment is a great thing, not taking it personally, and also knowing that we are less individualistic than we think, and the stage expresses itself through us. So while we may be tempted to say, stage orange can be a little selfish, and even the Spiral Dynamics book by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen mentions that. I think it talks about entering orange, where folks are sort of, they want to be seen as the good guy, but they might be a little selfish, and they want to self-disclose, but not too much, and so they might pull back. And it can be, for someone who values relationships, intimacy, a little bit difficult to sustain that with our stage orange folks. Not always. There's always going to be people at stage orange with a high emotional quotient. But we just want to be mindful not to take things personally and make decisions not in a reactive way if someone does something quote unquote selfish, but we want to take radical responsibility for ourselves and make sure that we are dealing with our own shadow. And if we're triggered by someone maybe dealing with us in a transactional manner, or not showing up, or only showing up when they feel like they need something, we deal with that part of ourselves that might be triggered, that hangover from childhood. And the more we take radical self-responsibility and make grounded choices and not take things personally, the better we can deal with stage orange. And I do want to say, we need stage orange, we need capitalism, we need an affluent society so that we all have the jobs provided by a stage orange society and the leisure time to do things like listen to content on Spiral Dynamics. So I hope you found this information useful. Sending you love and blessings, and I'll see you in the next video.